So we made our screwdriver, and now what we want to do is do some rendering. Before we do that, here's just a quick little add-on. This always looks kind of cool. It's a little tricky to use sometimes, and sometimes it's fussy, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to fillet these edges here. So I'm going to go to Solid, Fillet Edge, and I'm going to pick this edge right here. Now, the fillet, the thing to remember about the fillet, what it's going to do is it's going to round off this edge. I'm going to just select the default of 1, press Enter, gives me an idea of what the fillet's going to look like. It's going to curve like that. Here's the center and the radius, press Enter. Okay, that looks pretty nice. It rounded off the edge there. And that's pretty typical. You very rarely have sharp edges. Fillets can fail, though, on sometimes, so that actually looks pretty good. I'll just show you an example of a failed fillet. I'll go around to the next one, and I'll repeat that command, except this time I'm going to use a radius of 2. Okay, so let's see what that does. Okay, so that's a bigger fillet. Looks a little uglier there, and that one worked too. All right. Well, let's try one more time, except I'll go to, let's just double that again. Let's go to 4 and see what happens. Okay, there we go. That's exactly what I was expecting was going to happen. That failed miserably. And the reason was typically the radius of curvature of any curve that makes up the edge has to be less than the radius of your fillet. That's a general guideline. So these curves had a radius that was less than 4, and that made for a really ugly mess. So you can break your geometry. It is actually quite easy to do, especially with things like fillet edge. So you do have to be careful with that. If it doesn't work, try reducing your radius. So like we say, a radius of 1 worked nicely. So obviously these curves right here are less than radius 1, or rather, so it will work. So I'm just going to go back and try that again. Fillet edge, I'm going to change my radius back to 1. It says next radius because you can actually have a variable radius curve. I could start it out at 1, I could move it up to 2, go back to 1. That's kind of a fun thing to do too. Okay, now I'm just going to select all of the curves. It's a bit tedious. I have to move it around and select all the curves. This is easier than trying to window select. There are other ways of selecting things, but sometimes it's just easier to go ahead and do it. Press Enter one more time. Takes a few seconds. Okay, and there's my nice filleted edges there. And I'll just very quickly go around and do these as well. Gives a little more character. It's also more realistic because very rarely in objects do you get these edges that are not slightly rounded off. Okay. All right. So I'm tired of having a purple screwdriver. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into rendering mode. And we've talked about rendering mode before. So switch over here to materials. I'm going to import a plastic material. Okay, so here's plastic. And let's make our handle blue. I'm going to switch to pick a nice blue color here. Just pick it from the index. Okay. And now here's the tricky bit. If you notice, if I drag this over to the handle to assign it, well, it's still purple. Okay. Remember, right now I am in shaded mode. In shaded mode, everything takes the color of the layer that it's in. So right now, this object is on my surfaces layer. I can see that in my object properties. On my surfaces layer, my display color is by layer. So this is my layer color is purple, so everything is going to be purple. Now, if I want to actually see with the material, I have to switch to either rendered. There we go. That looks better. That looks like plastic. And again, you can see this is why, one of the reasons why it's nice to have these rounded edges, because they really do a nice job of reflecting the light in different patterns, and you can actually see all the surfaces of your object. Now this is meant to be a toy screwdriver, not a real screwdriver. A real screwdriver, we'd have this front end a lot sharper. But the other thing too is this is one continuous surface. And again, if I go back to my, if I select my object, I have a closed solid poly surface. If I want to have, say, a metal blade and a blue handle, I'm going to have to turn this into two objects. So I'm going to go here, and now one thing I could do is I could try and explode my surface. Now remember, this is now a poly surface. You can see there's a whole bunch of different surfaces, but the problem with that is that's going to turn into all the surfaces. So I'm just going to use my wire cut again, and I'll turn on my object snap. Now I should still have, yeah, so I still have that construction line which shows me the dividing line between the handle and the blade. So I'm going to select a curve, line, single line. I'm going to draw a line that goes straight across from one side to the other. Now I don't have another reference point, so I'm just going to hold the shift key down, and that makes sure that that line is orthographic. It goes perfectly straight. Okay, I could have also had the smart track on. That would have helped too. Solid edit tools, wire cut. Select cutting curve. Select object to cut. Press enter. Okay, keep all, yes. Okay, so, whoops, this ain't good. Ah, there we go. Took a second or two to figure that out. Thought it was going to crash on me. Okay, so now I've got two surfaces, and also because I did the wire cut, they're closed solid poly surface. There are some functions you could do to separate two things out, and they will turn these into surfaces which are not closed poly surfaces. So now I'm going to go to my materials tab here. I'm going to add a new material. Let's go with metal. And for the color of the metal, or the color of the metal, I go with steel is always good. There's some very subtle differences in the metal colors. And I'm going to drag that over to here, and there we go. So there is my nice shiny screwdriver with a steel handle and a plastic blade. Or, sorry, plastic handle, steel blade. There we go. Nice work.